So I'm going to introduce our next speaker. She's the, I'll start with what she said here. She believes your past experiences have significant value when you're a community pro. She attributes her success moderating the 5 million patients per month that Health Union reaches to her prior roles as college dean, founder of RipLB, an organization that combats heroin addiction on Long Island. We actually grew up in the same hometown. She's known me since I was a little kid. I didn't have this hair yet. And she's thrilled to be back at CMX after she led one of our most highest reviewed workshops at the last CMX Summit. Please help me give a very big CMX welcome to Jenn Patel!
Hi, as David said, I'm Jenn Patel. He also just asked me if I have any embarrassing baby pictures in my presentation of him, because we know each other from when we were little, and that was totally a missed opportunity. I'm really mad about that. But, so I don't. But I'm really excited to be here with you today, so thank you for coming. And just by a show of hands, how many people are moderating regularly in your communities? Okay, and of those people, how many have been in a stressful situation when moderating? Okay, so a lot of the same hands. That's pretty much what I expected. So today I want to talk to you about how to deal with that stress and turn it into solutions, and why I guess what qualifies me to talk about that is I got burnt out. And looking back, I see that there's ways that I could have avoided it, and there's also things I do differently now. So I want to share that with you guys. And basically what I was doing, I work at Health Union, where we own and manage currently 15 online communities for people who have different medical conditions. So for example, migraine.com is our biggest one right now, our most well-known one. At the time, I was moderating on migraine.com, rheumatoidarthritis.net, and copd.net. And my boss came to town one day, because she works remotely, and she just in the middle of a meeting was like, hold up, Jen, what is going on? You're so stressed. It's like emanating from you. What's happening? And that was a huge wake-up call for me, because I didn't realize how it was affecting, or that it was so obvious how stressed out I was. And from there, we came up with some solutions, some of which may apply to you. Some may be universal, some may not. We were able to hire some part-time moderators, but there were also other things I put in place that really helped. For example, self-care. So looking back, like I said, there's some structures and frameworks that I can share with you today to hopefully allow you to avoid the burnout that I went through. So to put it in perspective, for moderators, there's a great Seth Godin quote where he talks about showing up with empathy, and that it's difficult, it's hard to outsource, and will wear you out. And I think that totally applies to moderation, because obviously we're showing up with empathy. That's basically what we do. But it's precisely what we need from you. So if moderation is necessarily stressful, I still believe that burnout is optional, in that it's avoidable and preventable. And so as David mentioned, I run an organization that fights the heroin epidemic on Long Island, so I'm familiar with a lot of addiction models and 12-step programs, and there's a concept in one of the 12-step programs called acceptance, awareness, action. So I took that and tweaked it a little bit to make it more relevant to moderating. And so we have, bless you, the 4 A's of building solutions out of stress. We have awareness, attention, allow it, and action. And I'm going to go through them and break them down a little bit. But before I do, I want you guys to take a second and just think of a stressful situation you have going on right now. It could be something moderation related in your community, or it could be anything else, whatever is top of mind. So just take a second, think of that, and we'll go into this. So awareness, identify the stressor and why it's stressing you. Obviously, we need to do that before we take any further action. Next, attention, how is your stress manifesting? It can be really impactful to see how your stress is affecting the people around you, like I said with my boss. Next, allow it. Don't hide those feelings from yourself or others. In my case, I'm really lucky at Health Union. We have a very honest and open conversation kind of environment where that's the culture. If you don't, I would definitely recommend speaking with somebody, whether it's in your personal life or professionally, that you can allow those feelings to come up, because it's only once we do that and process those feelings, I believe, that we can then take action. And I believe you can take action in either yourself or in the systems around you. So let's start with self. So self-care is huge. There's so much I could say about self-care. It could obviously be a whole other talk. So what I'm going to do is just share the link to something I wrote about self-care in the Facebook Summit Facebook group, because I love that group, about self-care specifically as it relates to moderating. But I think the most important thing to say about it right now is that self-care is not selfish. I think oftentimes when we are in the, I see a lot of nodding heads. I'm so glad that you guys agree on that, because I feel like oftentimes as community professionals, I think of us as being in the helping profession, and oftentimes people in the helping profession put themselves second, put themselves last, thinking that they're helping, the more they help, the more time, the more they grind out that work, the more they're helping other people, when really it's only when we're treating ourselves well that we can be our best self for other people. It's like they say, I'm gonna use that cliched example, that on the airplane, you have to put your oxygen mask on first before you can help somebody else. Same thing with self-care and taking care of yourself. So that's something that's just involving you. It doesn't have to do with the stress inducer, right? So this next one involves you as well as the stressful situation. This is unconditional positive regard, and it's a counseling term, and basically what it breaks down to is exactly what it sounds like, regarding other people in an unconditionally positive way. This is one of my favorite things in life, and it's also one of the most challenging things I ever try to do. But it's not thinking of everything as positive, oh, everything's sunshine and roses and unicorns, although I love unicorns, but it's really seeing the best in people and believing you can bring out the best in people even when they're showing you their worst. So we use this a lot when we're moderating at Health Union, because as you might imagine, when people are talking about really painful chronic health conditions, they might come to us in a legit, literally physically and emotionally painful state. And so they might not be themselves. They might say something nastier than they meant to, or a mean remark that they wouldn't otherwise say. They might be on this, having the worst day where they just got a diagnosis that completely turned their world upside down. So we try to put that in perspective and think about that when we're moderating. And so we really believe, how can I bring the best out of this conversation, even though this person just maybe said something really snarky, or, you might otherwise think, oh, this person's just trolling us. But we try to give them the benefit of the doubt. And like I said, it's really challenging, but it also yields wonderful results. To kind of turn that around the other way and be on the other side of that, imagine that you're having a really hard day, and you go to take a break at your favorite coffee shop, and you go there and there's a 20-minute line, you're late for a meeting already, the barista gets your order wrong, you might say something rude that you wouldn't normally say. But if that barista responds to you with kindness, that interaction is going to go way differently than if they reflected your attitude back at them, right? So that barista was using unconditional positive regard on you when he or she was being kind. So I like thinking of it that way too, because we all can benefit from it as well as give it to other people. And the last thing I'll say about it is that it reminds me of that quote that's attributed to Plato that says, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle you know nothing about." I think that if you keep that quote in your head, you're using unconditional positive regard. So next we'll go into systems, and I separated them into two things. So the first system that we use that really helped us is strategy. So this affects, again, the structures around you, not just you, but if unconditional positive regard was in yourself and in others, because it changes the way that you're looking at the situation and how you feel, as well as the situation itself. This one is more about the way you go about your day, obviously, because it's strategy. So with purpose, that's really thinking about your why. What is your purpose in moderating? What are you trying to accomplish, and what are you trying to get done? So for us at Health Union, our purpose is to make people feel good. And so that cuts down on a lot of the decision fatigue that I may otherwise experience when I'm moderating, because I can always bring it back to, when I'm creating a response, how am I responding to, or what am I trying to do in responding to this person? I'm trying to make them feel good. Next is focus, and this is where you identify what's critical versus what's a nice to have. And from there we go straight into streamlining, which is where you decide from what's critical and what's nice to have, what can you cut or make more efficient. So I'll use an example of what we did with Twitter. Kelly, my coworker, who is in the audience today, was able to track and get the data on, and did an experiment where at the time that I was getting burnt out, we were tweeting 4 times a day from every community. And she did an experiment where we found out that if we went down to 1 tweet a day, it wouldn't affect our site traffic or engagement. And so we were able to then spend the time that we would have been creating that content on other things. So it was a way of streamlining, what's a nice to have, of course, me and Kelly, you had to pry our claws off of the tweeting 4 times a day because we really didn't want to give that up, but it really helped. And so that's how streamlining can reduce your stress. And then teamwork beyond your team is one of my favorite ones, and I also like to think of it about teamwork within your team. So the beyond your team is if you're doing something that's very manual and you're and it's repetitive, is there a way, if you have a tech team, you could reach out to them and see if it's something that you can automate. And we'll talk about automation a little bit more too. And then teamwork within your team. One of my favorite things that we started doing recently at Health Union was we have a couple of community managers that all do similar things with engagement and moderating. And so we have a little mini distribution list where if we come upon a really tricky comment, we just shoot a quick email to the rest of the team and say like, hey, how would you guys handle this? So that way you're not in it alone. And I think that is one of our biggest ways that we're avoiding burnout at Health Union, because you're able to get other people's input on it, and it's also combats that sense of like, oh my God, I got to figure this out myself, and what am I doing, and blah, 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 and then you just kind of go in a downward spiral. Not that I've ever done that, but basically, it really helps to just have that contact with somebody else and say, what do you guys think about this? And if you are not, lucky enough to have a team around you, maybe you're the only community manager at your organization, reach out in the CMX group. I think it's wonderful when people ask those kinds of questions. I learn so much when other people ask questions like that in the CMX group. So I just love that. I think that's a great resource that we have, luckily. And next, our other system is infrastructure. So if strategy is the way you go about your day and how you're functioning, the infrastructure is what you have built up around you to empower you to do that. And so using automation from the example before, when for example, we used to have our moderators a really long time ago write, notes to people when they would join the community. Now that's an automated email, a welcome email. So that's a real obvious example of how automation can help streamline everything. Next, community guidelines. I love this because, again, it cuts down on the decision fatigue. And I'm sure most of you do have community guidelines. If not, definitely that's something that can immediately make a huge impact when you're moderating, because it makes it very cut and dry. There's so many gray zones when you're moderating, but if you can have your community rules eliminate as much of that as possible by making them very black and white and saying, okay, does this violate a community rule? If it does, I'm following my protocol of what happens when a rule is violated. If it doesn't, I'm responding to the comment. So that's really helpful for us. And I meant to say, these four are not the only ways to build infrastructure, obviously, but it's what really helped us, the most impactful ones. Resource allocation, similar to like I was talking about with streamlining. When we did that, we decided, okay, the time we were gonna spend on tweeting, we're now gonna spend on strategy or whatever else part of our role that we wanted to focus on. And then lastly, training. This is my absolute favorite one. So like I said, we were lucky enough to be able to hire part-time moderators, and having a really robust training program in place is so helpful, not only because it eliminates one-off questions that can go on into eternity, but also, although we do always welcome questions, and I just have to say that just in case any of my moderators watch this, because I really love when they ask questions and we all learn a lot from it. But basically, with our training, we have, for example, a best practices FAQ, and I think that's a fabulous thing that everyone can benefit from. And basically, it's what I call responding to the doozies. So when we get like common doozies that like come up over and over again that just like kind of baffle us, and we figure out, okay, this will be our standard way of responding, we add it to the FAQ, and then other people can look at it and say, other moderators can look at it and say, okay, this is like the sentiment, they tweak it, make the language their own, and it just cuts down on a lot of additional decision time and questions about how to answer something that we've already answered before. So let's go into a little macro case study. We're doing a macro case study and a micro case study. So the macro case study is basically the story I told you guys, so we'll run it through the 4 A's. First, awareness. I had 3 sites when we realized later that 2 was ideal, plus I was trying to do all the work of my full-time job at the same time as moderating. Next, attention. My boss could sense my stress in a face-to-face meeting. That, like I said, was a huge wake-up call. Also, I reflected on it and realized I had stopped exercising so I could spend that extra time moderating. That is never a good sign. Allow it. My boss made it okay to say I was stressed. And then action. Once I was able to say, oh, you know what, I'm tapping out, I'm stressed, we were able to then come up with solutions, create systems, our part-time moderators, which we call cross-site moderators, and I also implemented self-care back into my life. So the last thing, then we have a micro case study. So this, I'm not sure how common this is in other communities. It's unfortunately very common in the communities that I work in, but it's, if you ever come across a suicidal commenter, that can be an extremely stressful situation. So let's run that through the 4 A's. So 1 is awareness. You want to recognize this is an emotionally charged situation and it might be stressing you. Next, bring attention to it. Notice, are your muscles tensing? Is your breathing getting shorter? Are you irritable when somebody interrupts you in the middle of that and asks you a question? Next, we allow those feelings to come up. Let yourself process that. That's a tough thing to be facing. And then you can move on to action. In this case, you might want to create a suicide protocol if you don't already have one, so that way everybody on your team knows how to handle this kind of stressful situation. And then also take a self-care action. Go take a break, call a friend that always makes you laugh, something that makes you feel good and kind of changes your brain chemistry. I love the fact, I used to work with students and I used to always talk about how if you listen to your favorite song or watch a really funny, stand-up routine first thing in the morning, it literally changes your brain chemistry and just sets you up on a positive path for the day. So I love using that as a break too. Currently, TJ Miller's Meticulously Ridiculous is cracking me up. It's so funny. So just suggesting that one. I have no affiliation with that, but saw it on the plane and it was awesome. Figured I'd tell you guys. It's so good, right? Yes. So lastly, I just want to say you can do this. It is possible to lower your stress and take action and then change how moderation feels. It's kind of like that really great James Baldwin quote that says, okay, I'm blanking on it, which is pretty stressful, so let me hold up here, getting meta. But it says, we can't change, well, I'm going to butcher it, so just go with me, guys. We can't change everything that we face, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Thank you.